In this video, I'll show you how to create this landing page and make it responsive with basic HTML and CSS. No media queries, no complicated stuff, just basic elementary HTML and CSS that even beginners will understand and get it quickly. As you can see, this landing page will contain a navigation element or a navigation bar at the top, some text somewhere in the middle, and a button below the text. So let's shoot. In my VS Code workspace, I'll have the index.html, which will be the HTML file or document for my landing page, style.css, which will be the style sheet, and then this background that I'll use as the background image of my landing page. Inside the HTML document, I'll have the standard or basic boilerplate for every HTML5 document. Inside the head section, I'll have the title for my landing page, which you can see over here, and then the link to the style sheet. In the body element, create a div and give it a class name of container. And that will be the containing element or containing box for every element in a landing page. Inside this container, create a nav element and give it a class name of navbar, and this will be the navigation bar of my landing page. In the navbar, create an h1 element, and inside the h1 element, you add a link and a tag where the href attribute leads directly to the index.html file. And the reason why I'm doing this is that any text inside this h1 element, whenever you click on it, it will lead you back to the index.html file, and it will serve as some kind of refreshing logo, a logo that will refresh the page whenever you click on it. And h1 will have an inner text of landing page. And wrap the page text inside the span tag, because in my CSS file, I'll set a distinct color for the page, for just the page text over there. Next, create an unordered list with a UL element and give it a class name of nav links. This will be for the navigation links of my nav bar. Inside the unordered list element, create 4 list items, which are also links. So the first list item will be for the home, the second list item will be for the about section, the third for the services, and the fourth for contacts. Next, still in our navbar, create a div and give it a class name of login register div. Inside this login register div, create 2 buttons. The first one for login and the second one for register. And that will be it for the navigation bar. Now, still in your container div, create another div and give it a class name of description div. And this will contain the text that I'll place somewhere in the middle of my landing page or my viewport. Inside this description div, create 2 h1 elements and 1 paragraph element, and add in any text or markup of your choice. Next, create another div, and this will be the last div inside this container, and give it a class name of subscribe div. Inside this subscribe div, create a button with an inner text of subscribe, and then you give it a class name of sub button. And this is all the markup we need for our landing page. Now let's style our markup. Select all elements with the global attribute selector, which is the asterisk, and reset the margin and the padding. Also set the box sizing property to border box. Now before we proceed with any styles, select all links and then remove the text decoration, which is the underline. You set the text decoration to none because we won't be needing them in this particular landing page project. Next, style the HTML and the body. So we select the HTML and the body together and separate them with a comma and set the width to 100% and the height to 100 VH. And set the background using this shorthand. So the first value will be for the background image, which will be the image I initially showed you, this image. And then the second value will be for the background repeat property. Set it to no repeat. The third value for the background position, set it to center. The fourth value for the background size, set it to cover. And the last value for the background attachment, set it to scroll. So this is what we have here. Next, we style the container itself. So we select the container class and we select it in our CSS file and set the width of the container to 100%. Set the minimum height of the container to 100 VH. Now add a vertical padding of 2% and a horizontal padding of 5%. And set the font family to sans serif. Next, we start the navbar. So with my navbar class name, in my container, select any element with the class name of navbar. Set the width of my navigation bar to 100%. Set the height to 12 VH. And return the navigation bar itself into a flex box by setting the display to flex. And when you do this, the child elements in the navbar automatically turn into flex items so that we can have better control, more control over their positioning in the navbar. So we set the justify content, which will be used to set the horizontal positioning of my child element. You set it to space between so that there will be enough space or equal space between the child elements. And then set align items to center, and this will center the child elements vertically. Next, we start the H1 element. So with my navbar, we select the H1 element and set the font size to 3.3 viewport width. And set the font width to 800. That will be a bolder text. Now let's start the link in the H1 element. So with my navbar, any H1 element, select the link and set the color to white. Next, we start the span element, which encloses the page text. So my navbar, select any H1 element and select a link and also select the span. And we set the color to red. That's what we have over here. Next, we style our unordered list. So inside my navbar, any unordered list, we set the display to flex. We turn the unordered list into a flex box. Now the default flex direction property is flex row. Even if you don't add the flex direction, the default flex direction property is row. It's set to row. And you add a gap of 1.5 viewport width. Next, we start the list items in my unordered list. So with my navbar, any unordered list, we pick the list items and set the font size to 1.5 viewport width. Set the font weight to bold, and then remove the list style, the bulletins, accessing the list style property to none. Next, we start the links inside our list items. So with my unordered list, select any list item and a link or the anchor tag and set the color to white. Now with my unordered list, any list item and the link, when you hover over it, set the color to this reddish color, and then you come back into your original link style and set the transition to 0.3 seconds so that we can have a smooth transition when you hover over our links or our list items. So this is what we have over here, just as you are seeing. Next, we start the buttons. So we select the div with the class name login register div. In my navbar, any element with the class name of login register div, set the display to flex and turn it into a flex box. Automatically, the two buttons inside it turn into flex items with a default flex direction property set to row. Our buttons will be displayed in a horizontal manner, and we set the gap to 1.5 viewport width to space them a bit. And we select the login register div, any button inside it, and set the font size to 1.4 viewport width. Give it a padding of 0.8 EM for the vertical and 1.5 EM for the horizontal. Set the border to none to remove all borders from our button, and then set the border radius to 30 pixels. Now you set the background to a reddish color and set the text color itself with the color property and set it to white. Now set the font width to bold and set the cursor to pointer so that when you hover over our buttons, there will be a human hand to indicate that we are hovering over it. Now let's set properties for when we hover over the button. When you hover over the button, we use the .login register div with any buttons and with the hover pseudo class. Set the background to a lighter red color. And you increase the size with the transform property. You scale it by 1.2. And that will be it for. So now you go back to your button, your original button selector, and then you add a transition of 0.2 seconds for a smooth transition. Let's not forget that. And that will be it for our landing page. Sorry, that will be it for the navigation bar of our landing page. Next, we start a description div. So with my div with a class name of description div, select it. Still in my container, select the description div class and then set the width to 80% and the maximum width to 800 pixels. Set the margin with this shorthand, the margin top to 30 viewport height, margin right 0, there will be no margin right. Set the margin bottom to 2 viewport height and the margin left to 32 viewport width. Set the color to white and set the font weight to bold. Now set the text shadow 1 pixel to the right, 1 pixel to the bottom, and 5 pixels blurred, and give it a reddish color. And this will add this shiny effect, shiny reddish fiery effect to our white text. And we text align center. Next, in our description div, we start the H1 elements. So in our description div, pick any H1 element and set the font size to 4 viewport width. Next, we start the P element in our description div. So with my description div, pick any P element, set the font size to 1.5 viewport width, and set the margin top to 1 viewport height so that there will be a little bit of space between the two H1 elements and the paragraph element over here. And that will be it for our description div. Next, we style our subscribe button over there. So my div with the class name of subscribe button, still in my container, we select the subscribe div and set the width to 40%. Set the maximum width to 250 pixels and set a margin of 3.5 viewport height for the vertical margin, for the top margin, 0 for the right margin, 0 for the bottom margin, and 50 viewport width for the left margin. Now let's start the button inside. So in my subscribe div class, any button with the class name of sub button, you select it and set the width to 100%. Set the padding to 1.5 em. Set the font size to 1.8 viewport height. Set the background to a reddish color and change the text color to white. Remove all borders by setting the border to none and set the border radius to 60 pixels. Set the font weight to bold and set the cursor to pointer. And when we hover over this button, in my subscribe div and the sub button, when we hover with the hover pseudo class, set the background color to a dark reddish color. And then we increase the size with the transform property and scale it by 1.3. And you go back into your sub button and set the transition to 0.3 seconds. And this will be the final design for our landing page. So with the landing page, when you click on the H1 element over there, the logo, it refreshes the page, and you have our navigation items or navigation elements, my unordered list, and 2 buttons for login and register. And you also have the inner text and the button below the text, and you have the background itself. So this is a simple way to create this landing page and make it responsive, such that now I'll inspect, and you can see that when we change the width of the viewport, you see that the text are adapting to the screen sizes, and that is responsive. That is what responsive web designing is about. So this is basically how to create this landing page and make it responsive without the use of media queries or any complicated code.